Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here with our new moon forecast. We have our new moon at 11:27 p.m. So the sun and the moon will be in exact degrees at 11:27 p.m. here in Hawaii. Pacific time is now only 2 hours later than us because we don't do the daylight savings time thing. So then it's going to be 1:30 a.m. on the 13th in Pacific time and moving into later times as we move to later time zones. This is also a very special celebration in India called Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights. It's the triumph of the light over the darkness. And we can see that this new moon falls at a time when we have our moon and our sun both in a darkened state, a state of debility. The sun is still in the last degrees of Libra, where it's debilitated. And the moon then moves into Scorpio, where she's debilitated in the first degrees. So we're in a situation that's basically like the opposite of where we were in the spring when we were celebrating Akshaya Tritiya, where we have our luminaries both exalted. And so this is a really important thing to understand about the way the holidays work. You know, they set off on new moons more often than not. Some of them start with full moons. But this is a time when we might actually be in our darkest state and seeing things from very limited potential. And so the festival is helping us bring the light from within ourselves outside of ourselves. We are able to light external candles, and this can remind us of the singular flame that exists within each of us and how we are able to emanate that light even when everything is completely dark. In the mythology, there's different stories depending on what region of India you're relating from. In other areas of Southeast Asia, one of the more famous ones is the story of Sita and Ram. This is what they celebrate in northern India, where it's the coming home of Ram after his long exile into the forest. He was exiled by his father against his father's wishes, right, which is very akin to the sun being in Libra. His father is the king, the sun, and instead of having power to make choices based entirely on his own relationship with source, he had to make the choice to exile his favored son, who was going to take his place, take his throne, because one of his wives, who had a different child named Bharata, used a boon she had. She had saved him at a previous juncture, and he had offered her a boon. And she used that boon in this moment to exile the competition of her son for the throne. Of course, Bharata didn't even want the throne, right? He wanted Ram to have the throne. But nonetheless, against everybody's wishes, except for this one woman, Ram went off to the forest and was exiled. Now, of course, this all had to unfold because there was the great demon Ravana who was becoming more and more powerful, and it was needed for Ram to be in this situation and to have Sita, his wife, be taken from him by Ravana to start the battle that would take place in what is now Sri Lanka, the land of Lanka, where Ravana had his palace. And in order for all the different things to work out so that Ravana could be defeated, this is what needed to happen, right? So there's always a why whenever something terrible happens, or why we needed to be put in the situation we were in, and we can only see it in hindsight, right? We can't see it in the moment. It just seems horrible. But of course, Ram being of Vishnu himself, was able to overcome all the obstacles, rescue his wife, and come back home to take back the throne that was rightfully his many years later. And this triumph is what we would be celebrating in this moment, in this time on Diwali. So I'm going to share my screen so we can see these planetary alignments. You can see the sun is still at the end of Libra here in Vishaka, the moon joining. And then the moon will immediately go into the first degrees of Scorpio, which is also the star of Vishaka. And this is where she's debilitated in the first three degrees of Scorpio. Our sun's debilitated in Libra because of giving away our power to others, right? Letting our relations with people determine what is true and right, as opposed to our relationship to source, to the sun directly. The moon is debilitated in Scorpio because we become overly attached to our emotions in Scorpio. We become suspicious, we become dramatic, and we have trouble seeing clearly and feeling clearly. We instead ride this roller coaster wave of emotions, and we can become angry, we can become controlling, or just overly emotional and dramatic. And it causes us to feel a lack of stability, right? The moon is exalted across the way in Taurus, where we're stable, where we're grounded, where we take care of our earthly needs so that our mind and emotions are not all over the place. Oftentimes you'll see, like, children or even with adults who aren't very good at eating at constant periods of time, their behavior just becomes out of control. Their emotions are all over the place if they're not taking care of those most basic stabilizing needs that they need to every day, which is why we care for our children. We help them make good choices. We can also see Mars is very closely attached to this new moon, right? And because this is a new moon in Libra, and we've had all these planets here, Mercury just moved out, but we had Mercury, Moon, Sun, Mars, K2 all here for the last many weeks, Mars a little longer. We've been dealing with this Libra problem, right? The eclipses that we just had, the lunar eclipse was across the way in Aries, the solar eclipse, the moon and sun were actually still in Virgo, but the eclipsing node K2 was in Libra. We're at the end of this 1.5-year cycle that we've been in of Aries, self, Libra, others, and reckoning with the ways in which we compromise or don't compromise with others in order to get our needs met here on the earth plane. This period and this moment in time is really the end of all of that for us. It's like a last bow to whatever it is we needed to learn in this area of our life. Whatever relational issues you tend to have, whatever patterns you repeat again and again and again in your romantic relationships, but also in your partnerships with other people. This is what you need to look at in this time. It's going to be different for each of us based on what our rising sign is, based on what our tendencies are, where we're heavy. For people who have a lot of planets in Libra, it's probably going to be this constant people pleasing, compromising your own truth, your own values, your own power, because you want to make other people happy, because you want to be liked more than anything. Rarely does it come from such an altruistic place as really truly wanting everyone else to be happy. It's wanting to be happy with oneself, and seeing that only in the reflection of others. If you're heavy hitting in the Aries department, then you probably don't compromise as much and do as many things in order to please other people, and spend the majority of your time focusing on yourself. And the lesson might be to lose a little of the self, lose a little bit of the ego, lose a little bit of the part where it's all about you, and see the ways in which compromise is healthy and important. For many of us, it'll be a bit of a gray zone. We'll be in different areas of our life. We might compromise more than others, and we might have difficulty being vulnerable or asking for help or trusting that anyone wants to actually help us. But we might also have trouble getting out of our own head and our own way and our own path, and having this very limited self-serving vision. It's a pretty big problem we have in the world right now. Our capacity to harmonize with others is at an all-time low. The internet fuels this incredibly, right? Where people can just kind of write whatever they think without knowing all the information. Everybody is an expert in whatever they feel like being an expert in that moment. And there'll be arguments and fights. And while I don't believe the goal in every conversation should be to harmonize, You know, when people say the only important thing is being nice, or the most important thing is being nice, I don't actually agree with that. I don't think that's true. I think the most important thing is truth and getting closer to that truth. And sometimes that requires an argument. Sometimes that requires conflict, but it doesn't need to be a battle, and it doesn't need to be rigid on either side. And because Jupiter has been involved in the situation in Aries for so long, since April, there's a lot of self-righteousness about what we believe happening right now. And the effects are catastrophic, right? We're literally watching a genocide occur. And it's because of beliefs that are so strong that this is what's right, that we have the right to defend ourselves, say, from the perspective of Israel, or that these people are so horrible, we need to attack them in order to, in order to live our life, we have to destroy somebody else. That is an old story that has been played out for a long, long time on this earth, right? It's being played out in many other places where the cameras are not rolling. It is the essence of our individual arguments and our relationships. I'm right. And in order for me to be right, you can't be right, which is just not true, right? There can be many rights. Everybody has the right to want to live, the right to want to be happy, the right to want to practice whatever, faith or spiritual practices they have, the right to want to learn, the right to want to eat. These are all rights that we all have. And sometimes they conflict. Sometimes it is that there's limited resources on the table, even if that in itself is a man-made manufactured problem, meaning there aren't necessarily limited resources on the table. We've just made it that way. And by we, I mean we, because we can blame the leaders of all these different nations, including the United States of America, which has been one of the most supportive of creating conflict across the globe. We can blame the leaders, but at the end of the day, we keep electing them, right? We're the ones who come to an election and say, these are our two choices. And look, it's happening again. The same two choices we had last time. These are our only two choices. But that's not true. Those aren't our only two choices. If everybody were to band together, we would have many choices. And the first one would be get rid of the two choices we've already had because they're not good, right? We've already seen they're not good. Nobody actually wants them. So why are we continuing to perpetuate the idea that the power is in some other place so far away from us that all we get to do is mark a ballot once every 4 years to say what our opinion is, and we don't even have choices on the ballot that make any sense to us. So some people say, well, just don't vote, and just vote with your dollar and just, with your actions. But the truth is, most of us are so mired in the matrix at this point that our dollars and our actions are still continuing to go to feed this same problem. The corporations that truly own our world and the industries that truly own our world have strings in every place, including each one of us as individuals, as we show up on these internet platforms, as we, need to purchase things. Even the most off-grid people I know who are really, really trying to live in tune with nature still have to purchase quite a lot of things, often from multinational corporations. So we've gotten ourselves into this mess, and we can sit here and say, well, I didn't do that because, it happened 30 years ago, it happened 40 years ago, it happened 50 years ago. It's very easy to blame our parents' generation. The baby boomer generation has been in control for a long time, and there's many of them, and they're continuing to be in control. But nonetheless, there was things that led to that reality as well. And everybody's being raised by somebody, and each generation is passing their wounds along, and we're collecting them, holding them, nurturing them, and continuing to perpetuate them into the future. So it needs to stop with each one of us. Just the violence we see in our own home, in our own mind, even if you live entirely alone and you have no children and you have no partner and you really spend a lot of your time alone, that in and of itself is the problem, right? That we're living in a time when so many people are alone and don't have a village or even a family or even a community to really call upon. But even more than that, we have people who do have those things, and in that family unit or in that community feel alone and feel as though the choices that they have to make in harmonizing with other people is to basically keep their mouth shut and to go along with what other people in that family or that community believe, so as not to be cast out. Because our fundamental deep, deep, deep wound that we hold since before we were humans is one of survival. And humans and other mammals need other beings like themselves. They need acceptance. If you don't have that, you won't make it, right? So we've now created a situation where people regularly follow what they don't believe in order to be accepted. They can see there's something wrong in it, or they follow what they maybe mostly believe. Maybe they believe 3 out of 5 things, and that's enough. And I see it happening with children. It's very interesting to see how children's groupings work when you watch, and how quickly a child can be told, this person is the leader, this person is who's cool, this person is the one you need to follow. You don't want to be an uncool person over there. You want to be a cool person. And they'll go against their own best interest and hurt themselves and hurt their friends in order to continue to keep the leadership of the very being that they don't even want to be in power at all. It starts very young, very, very young. And we can blame it all on parents for, teaching kids that they have to be this way or that way and telling them what they have to do. We can blame it on society. We can blame it all we want outside of ourselves. But every time we participate in that, whether it's for ourselves or whether it's for our child or whether it's for our relationship, every time we don't say what's true because we don't want to have an argument, or every time we make anything someone else tells us about some deeper conflict and we're unwilling to just open our mind to the potential that maybe there's like black zones, or that's not the right like hidden spots, hidden areas where we are not able to look and we don't see ourselves in our entirety. We're unwilling to take the feedback that the rest of the world gives us. And so we then stay stuck in our mind and make the other person wrong because that's the only way we can continue to be right. It's all very heavy ego stuff. And it's coming to a head right now. It's like, how much longer can we do this? Not much, not much. So within the year, we're at the darkest time when our capacity to connect to our source, our direct relationship with the light, is at its weakest. But on Earth, we're also in this darkest state, right? We're in this deep state of delusion and illusion and ignorance. And even half the things that are working for the light are illusions, false, taking us in so many different directions. We will have trouble maintaining our connection to truth and to source and to the light. So now we have this opportunity to really look at ourselves honestly and really see what path we're on. Vishaka, the moon star that we are passing through, is a path. It's a long path, a solitary path, and it happens at the end of Libra for a reason. The beginning of Libra, we're trying to build structures with Chitra that encapsulate people and allow people to work together and harmonize. In the middle, we're in Swati and we're waving our sword at every illusionary enemy we think there is. And we need to learn to hold it with strength and with power and only swing when it's necessary. And to recognize how many of the demons outside of us are actually figments of our imagination inside of us. And then Vishaka is where we take a solitary path, where we say, actually continuing to base everything on everyone else isn't really working. The path is dark and it's scary, and yet I still need to walk it alone. And it's a long path. The results in Vishaka come over time. It's represented by a tree with long branches that grew over many years, or a potter sitting at a wheel, patiently making their pottery, or a lotus flower at the end of a finish line. And he's ruled by Indra Agni, which is the sacrificial fire. Agni is the fire, and Indra's the king of gods, but the Indra Agni is a fire of sacrifice. You can't go to every party. You can't have all the friends. You can't have all the things you want that are beautiful and artistic and add joy to your life. If you continue to just collect things that make your life more beautiful, your life will be beautiful yet empty. Sometimes we have to shed stuff, be it emotional or mental or physical belongings and things. Sometimes we have to show up messy and ugly and walk through a thorny path by ourselves. We cannot spend our lives constantly in the state of pretty, right? It doesn't get us very far. And it's fleeting. It doesn't last. With the ruler of Libra, Venus, in the 12th house from this new moon, debilitated in Virgo, we can see that there's a lot of criticism of self and others. A lot of the criticism that comes in Virgo, where we're nitpicking how other people don't do things right, comes from our own pain, our own wounds of how we're not doing everything right. And again, this can very much seem to come from our parents. Like if we were criticized a lot as children, then it's likely to be a trait that we carry and hold. But certainly all around us are advertisements of how we're not doing it right? Or how we're not pretty enough, or how we're not smart enough, or we're not strong enough. And it's at the point now where many young people just don't even have actual lived experiences. Their lives take place entirely on their computers. And not even just young people. This affects people of all different generations, where they can just live vicariously through screen characters and TV shows that they're attached to, or through movies or through video games. And it's easier, and they have more power, and all the issues that exist in their real life don't exist there. And then the more real life things like reality TV or social media, which is obviously not real, but yet you're engaging with real humans, not characters. Those often serve to make people feel bad, right? They're not as wonderful as all these other people who are living these wonderful lives, and somehow their problems seem to be even more magnified because they can see all these other people are traveling and enjoying life and enjoying relationships and enjoying all these things, and they're not. You know, that might be what they feel within themselves, is that they're not. So this is a crucial thing to reflect upon as well. The ways in which you think things are supposed to be, or think that they are for other people, can affect the way you show up for yourself and others in relationship. This idea, this illusion that somehow someone else somewhere has it perfect because they have something more, maybe more money, or more, attractive looks, or more intelligence, or more athletic prowess. So our debilitated capacity to show up in relationship in a vulnerable way, as opposed to a criticizing way, is at hand here as well right now. And then Mercury has already jumped into Scorpio. And Mercury in Scorpio is a tricky thing. Each of the planets operate differently in different signs. So when the sun moves into Scorpio, this is not a lot of trauma and drama. The sun is very powerful in Scorpio. The sun is able to shed light on the shadows and show all those demons that are crawling in the recesses of our mind and bring them up. But Mercury does not do as well in Scorpio. Here we might be more confused in our communication. We might be more suspicious in our communication. We might be more controlling in our communication. Because we're so afraid of being stung first or stomped on first, we sting quickly. We say things that hurt people, or we use our words in a manipulative way, even without realizing it. Most of what we do, we don't realize we're doing, right? People often reflect this back to me when I'm doing readings. It's like it takes a lot of self-awareness to really look at what you're doing. It doesn't take a lot of self-awareness to co-opt different celebrations and different activations and portals and all these kind of things. It doesn't take a lot of bravery or courage to project light from whatever beliefs you might have or hold, or whatever you've experienced. That doesn't take a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And that's not a sharing of beliefs, and that's not a sharing of judgments. Vulnerability is a sharing of your feelings, and usually your states of fear or sadness or even anger. Sometimes anger is not used vulnerably, but if you're true with your anger, and particularly for people, often women, for example, might not be very comfortable with their anger. So it can be very vulnerable to express that they're angry, because they immediately think that's going to lose them all their connections. It's going to lose their relationships if they express their anger. Being able to do so in a healthy way is key. And that's not at a high point right now. Right? What's at a high point is thinking other people are responsible for your discipline and your courage. What's at a high point is thinking other people are the ones holding the power, and that you somehow need to do what's going to please everyone, as opposed to what's true. But we're not at a high point of capacity to really look within and be vulnerable and share from that place. And so this can make this moment quite challenging. And this is why we do all the practices we do. In the Vedic tradition, the practices are all helping bring you closer to truth. Astrology illuminates. It's Jyotish, the science of light. It's illuminating what is. It's illuminating the exact problems that we're walking through. But you need to do something, right? You need to still do something. And the more you have daily practices that bring you back to the self, like meditation, the more likely you're going to be able to maintain an equilibrium in the face of the drama and trauma. Or instead of surrendering your power to people please, or surrendering your discipline because something more fun is happening, the more likely you'll be able to withstand all the temptation around you to do what you know in your heart is right. And that doesn't always mean showing up every single day on your yoga mat or exercise in whatever way that you do. Sometimes it does mean that you should go to the party or engage with the friend or stop what you're doing to engage with your child or your partner. It doesn't mean that your yoga practice is more important than your relationship. But it means that you have those daily regular practices that you do every single day that bring you to a state where you can then show up in your relationships in a true way and not just in a judgmental or attacking way. And so much of our world encourages judgment, attack, criticism, telling people as opposed to listening. That it can be very hard to do. It can be actually one of the greatest acts of bravery there is in this world. And a lot of people mistake what they're doing for being vulnerable as well. And so it can be very interesting to watch people talk about things or make judgments about different people or groups of people and think that that's being vulnerable, when it's really just, it's being risky because you're putting your beliefs out there and other people might not agree with them. But it's not being vulnerable because you're not sharing how it's affecting you. You're sharing opinions, judgments, beliefs. It's different. Now that we have Saturn direct, we are much more clear, thankfully, in one area of our world. We have one planet in its own sign operating forward motion with intelligence to help us to commit to that area of our life. And I just did a live discussion with my Patreon group, Cosmically Aligned, where we went through each different rising signs relationship with Saturn. Because if you don't know what Saturn rules and where it's residing right now in your chart, you won't really understand where your commitments are very clear, where your area of stuckedness has started to unfold and unfurl. And Saturn still has this one-way drishti, this one-way gaze on our Jupiter, which is still retrograde until the end of the year. But so this adds some confusion still, right? We still have a part of us that is confused about what we believe. We might have a lot of old beliefs stockpiling coming up that aren't necessarily current or present with what's actually happening right now. That can be detrimental to what we're committed to, right? Because it can affect our capacity to really understand what we're looking at. It can affect our capacity to really infuse our next moves with our beliefs so that we're aligned and not making more commitments that are kind of stockpiled upon beliefs that aren't really serving us anymore. There can be fear. There's always fear where Saturn's present. But usually in this case, it's more like appropriate fear, like fear of what's really happening, fear of what actually is. And it's social fear in Aquarius. So there can be a strong desire to really make right certain power dynamics that are not right, fighting for the little people and moving away from lining up behind the big powerhouses, whether that's, within your small circle or group, or whether that's on a big global scale, as we can see unfolding with this horrific, war that we're watching from our various depots of safety. So this is a moment in time to really, really see and take the temperature of where you're at and what you're doing and where your relationship with the light and the dark is. If you are somebody who likes to work in the darkness and in the shadows, where can you find light? Some people spend too much time in the dark and have created so much of that around themselves that it's difficult to even relate to other people because they're mired in that state of the shadow work. Other people only want to live love and light. They never want to look at the darkness. They always want everything to be fun and beautiful and harmonious. And well, now's the time to enter into the darkness, instead of just pushing away hard feelings, sitting with them and integrating them and allowing them to inform your light. In the Diwali tradition, there's actually 5 days that this is a celebration, and it began on Friday. So it begins before the new moon. And then the new moon puja is to Lakshmi, who's the goddess of abundance and wealth and beauty and harmony in relationships. So more than just the material wealth, which so much focus gets put on in this day and age, there's spiritual wealth. The highest thing that Lakshmi can teach us is graciousness. So in telling our truths and in being honest with ourselves about our truth, we're not losing our grace. We're not losing our capacity to be gracious to others and to extend people a long line of like credit that they probably aren't trying to be mean, bad, judgmental, that people are truly doing the best they can, right? That's not always true, right? There are some people who are really, really sick and twisted. There are some people who really are so they have so much anger in their own heart that they're not really doing, their intentions are to be horrible, right? That does exist. But even those people, extending the credit of awareness that how much trauma, how much they're holding that must bring them to that place. Certainly within your relationships with your loved ones, certainly in your family and in your community and in your home, finding that charitable nature where you can, know that the more you extend graciousness, grace, your own sense of harmony, the more that's going to lift that up for other people. And the more people will be able to also then extend grace to the person behind them, and the person behind them, and the person behind them. And so we can light candles and honor the light that we do carry within us, this like never dying flame that we each have within us. And we can honor that we're all truly doing the best we can. And that at our essence, at our core is love. And that's really what we want to be extending out. And it's really what we want to be sharing with those closest to us. So happy Diwali and new moon. If you are not already a member of Cosmically Aligned, my Patreon group, you can join. And I do these breakdowns for the new moon and full moon. And every week, what the stars are saying for your sign, for your rising sign, what's happening to you in your world. And it's very different from sign to sign, very, very different. And then I have these larger reports that I do, like for Saturn going direct. I just did one, and I'm about to do one for Rahu going into Pisces and Ketu going into Virgo. By the end of November, we'll have had that major transit switch where the 1.5-year cycle of focus on self and others with Aries and Libra is coming to a close. And the nodes, of course, move backwards. So we're going to be focusing our energy in the watery spiritual realm of Pisces. How is that going to really unground people? Right? Each planet, each graha operates differently in different signs. As I said before, when I was talking about Scorpio, well, the North Node has just been in a fire sign, a self-centric fire sign for 1.5 years, spraying in an air-like way, in an exaggerated and illusionary way, fire. Joined with Jupiter, where we can be very self-righteous. This is right, this is wrong. Now he's moving into a water sign, right? And this is where we take like a fan and put it in water and imagine all that emotion spraying out in all different directions. And Pisces isn't just about personal emotion, it's spiritual, it's our connection to source. So when we see all these different sort of new age amalgamations of what once had some cultural root or some spiritual root somewhere, and it's now been blasted through the eyes of anyone who's ever taken a course online or read a book or something, all that's going to spray out even more. Right? The North Node doesn't do that well in water signs, and it doesn't do that well in fire signs. And the South Node is moving into Earth. So we've been pulling away from diplomacy, and we've been pulling away from our capacity to compromise for the last 1.5 years. And now it's moving into Earth, Virgo, details. South Node drills down deep. It's the past. It's our past wisdom. It's all that we have assimilated. And it's difficult to drill down deep through the hard earth, where we have so much vested in our tangible reality. Moving away from the details, hyper-focusing on the feeling of being one. This will be a whole other chapter in our story that we're collectively building here. And of course, for each of you, it will be a different area of your life. You know, for Pisces rising people, it'll be a very self-focused time. For Aries people who just coming out of a very self-focused time, it'll be a time of great escape and confusion. And so we need to understand astrology in this way if we really want to understand it. If we really want more than just kind of, you know, cute words to put on a flyer for an event we're promoting, and we really want to truly understand what our connection is to the universe, we need to get it on this deeper level, which is why I started this group to begin with, for those who really want to understand it and use it, because this is what it's meant for. It's meant for us to use. This wisdom, this knowledge wasn't passed down to us to sell a workshop, you know, it was passed down to us to really truly understand it, integrate it, and use it. And so hopefully I can be a small part in helping people with that. Blessed new moon, and I will see you soon. Namaste.